Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I've gotten a couple of viewer questions recently regarding colors that I like to use during cold water periods. After all, I think most people recognize that a lot of the forage for bass begin to go dormant during extreme cold water periods. Your things like frogs, crayfish, salamanders, a lot of them are not active during cool water temperatures, your winter period. So that leaves the primary forage for bass being other fish species, your shad, your herring, your cisco, bluegill, perch, things like that. So from that standpoint, most people would say, well, just throw something that's a silver or shad color and you'll be fine. Those do work very well, but I honestly feel like this time period is one of the better time periods to stay away from trying to match the hatch. And the reasoning for that is there are a lot of dying forage species, young of the year, sick, other sick fish. They tend to really struggle during your cold water periods. And that can create shad die offs. It can create die offs of whatever those fish are because they can't handle the cool water, making for a lot of easy meals for bass. And a lot of times you start to see these forage species grouped up more than any other time of the year. Whether that's shad, you'll see giant shad balls, an entire creek arm is full of shad. If you're out graphing lakes up by me right now, you're going to see what I call Christmas trees of bluegill. You're going to see giant schools of bluegill that are basically dormant for the winter period stacked upon each other. Well, when that happens, it's kind of hard to get your bait to separate from those fish species if they're grouped up that much. So using a color that doesn't match the hatch can give your bait an advantage to make it stand out from all of the thousands of other bait fish that are in those areas. So my bait choices might actually surprise you a little bit. And the questions I've had, one specifically was geared towards crankbaits. So I'm going to talk more about crankbaits, but these colors can be applied to other baits, your jigs, your soft plastics, even your jerk baits. So I'm going to use Berkeley Money Badgers to kind of walk through it and give you some of my reasoning. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is what Berkeley on the Money Badger calls their spring craw. This is a fantastic crankbait color. A lot of people, I think, throw it more so in the spring, but the reason I like this so much is it is a good shad imitation bait. The chartreuse does pop out from the other forage species or bait fish that are in that area, but chartreuse tends to kind of turn white in the water as well. It's one of the first colors to lose its color as you get deeper. So if I'm looking for a bait and I know I'm fishing around a pile of shad, I tend to go with more of chartreuse style baits or even more yellowish like the spring craw, and it tends to stand out better. I get some phenomenal bites on it. So I don't generally throw as many, say, sexy shad colors, right? Your true shad, pearl white kind of colors. In the cold water periods, I prefer to throw a spring craw color much, much more. I get a lot of really good quality bites on it, and I feel like it's because it stands out. So a lot of these other colors actually tend to go with the cover that I'm fishing. If I'm fishing around wood and it's a cold water period, I absolutely love to throw something that's got some blue. This is the Killer Craw color. One of my favorite cold water colors. You've seen me use it on the river here and catch a bunch of fish. But I feel like there's a lot of crayfish that hibernate around wood. I've pulled up wood pieces in the past, like branches, and you'll see crayfish that are just stacked in hibernating in those wood areas. And because of that, a lot of times in that cold water, the crayfish actually will have a blue color to it. And I think that's one reason blue works well. If you like to throw jigs, one of your cold water killer colors is probably a blue jig, a black and blue, or something that's got some of your sapphire blue. So I love to throw something that's got some blue, especially around wood, because that is where a lot of crayfish hibernate. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but they'll actually get into holes within the wood and hibernate inside of the wood. And blue is one of the colors I love anytime I'm fishing around it. I got to tell you, I really like to throw dark colors during cold water periods. And a big part of that is because a lot of times the bass are going to be holding in dark areas, meaning they're trying to absorb sunlight and they're trying to absorb heat off objects absorbing sunlight. And the darker the object, the more sunlight those objects hold. So if you've got a dark spot on a sand flat, great place to look for smallmouth, great place to look for largemouth. If you've got a stump, that stump generally will be darker than, say, the sand that it's around. If you're fishing rock, a lot of times the rock holds more heat because it's darker than other objects and it just can retain that heat. So a lot of times I try to match the cover as well to a point, or match that the fact that those objects are darker. If you catch bass during the winter months, a lot of times they are much darker in color because they're actually turning the color of the objects they're holding by. So it's not unusual to catch dark colored bass during cold water periods. And goes the same for forage species. A lot of times the minnows, a lot of times the bait fish and bluegills that those fish are eating will also turn darker. So I like to throw baits that generally are darker during cold water periods. The next one that I really like to throw is a red hue. This is the Ghost Red Craw, an absolute phenomenal killer. You know, again, people love to throw red in the spring. It's a great color in the fall, a great color in the winter as well. Red for me is a great color to throw around rocks. Again, even though bass are not keying in specifically on crayfish, the crayfish live amongst rocks. That's one of the best places to find them. So you know if bass are holding by rocks, which they are to absorb heat, if they happen to come across a crayfish, they're probably going to eat it, even though they shouldn't be out that time of year. So just because a red colored crankbait goes by doesn't mean they're not going to eat it, because there's no crayfish that are out and about. But I really like to throw red. And when I say red, I like to throw more of like a blood red color. I'm not as big on, say, your really bright red colors. I like to throw something that's toned down. This is actually a translucent one, which makes it even better. It just seems to really give the bait a good color, and it's one that I feel like the fish really jump on. So if I'm fishing around rock, like a riprap bank, that's one of my absolute go-tos. Now, another one along that same line, this is Ghost Green Craw. If you like the old Phantom Green Wiggleworts, this is really similar to that. A little bit of orange, a little bit of green. This is one that I like to throw if I am fishing, say, some green grass that's still growing, that hasn't died off, or if I'm fishing a flat where I've got dark spots on the flat. I think this is a really good bluegill and perch imitating bait. You've got bluegill across the country, bass, one of their primary forage species. And if I've got areas where I can almost get my bait to match some of that remaining green grass, some of those dark spots, I catch a lot of fish. And this is one that I have caught a pile of fish on all year round, to be honest with you. I think your green colored crankbaits are extremely underutilized. It's one of those things I always wonder why green pumpkin is one of the best selling plastic colors, but when it comes to crankbaits, you don't see them nearly as much. But those four hues are like my go-to hues. So regardless of whether you like the Berkeley Money Badgers or you like other crankbaits, most companies will offer crankbaits in those hues. And I would highly suggest giving some of your darker crankbaits a try during the cold water period. They, for me, seem to generate better bites and better quality bites. So let me know in the comment section, what are some of your favorite cold water wintertime colors? Do you agree with these? Do you disagree with these? I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure others would as well. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, new video coming out tomorrow.